roadblocks that actually prohibit an individual from acquiring good character. And we had talked about the importance of good character in the previous classes. So we said that in order to develop good character, this involves a lot of mujahada, right? It involves a lot of spiritual struggle. It involves a lot of discipline, and which is why he titled this section of Riyadh al-Nafs, or he entitled it Discipline in the Soul. So one of the biggest barriers to this, is he himself mentions, is sloth. What is sloth? It's not just laziness. It's like an extreme form of laziness. And if he says that this is the biggest barrier from acquiring good character. What do we know about sloth, and why do you think he focused on this in particular? Sloth, like we said, is laziness.
Also hygiene.
It has a little bit with hygiene, right? But hygiene, well, inshallah, we can definitely talk about that, and that is related to good character, right? Being presentable, making sure that we're looking nice, making sure that we're smiling.
It represents like an animal state.
Okay.
Lazy people aren't disciplined.
Right, so that's part of it, right? This laziness, and a lot of the things that we talked about, where does laziness stem from? And what are the biggest issues, the biggest problems with laziness?
Could be influenced by the shaitan. I believe
Of
there
course.
is even dua.
A'udhu billahi min kasal. Right? I seek refuge from laziness. Yes.
I forgot what I was going to say.
Unproductivity, like not doing anything.
And the problem with sloth is that it's cyclical, right? The more you don't do, what happens? The more motivation you lose, right? And the more motivation you lose, the lazier you get. And this just keeps happening, and you start developing all these barriers, and you start developing all these difficulties between you and your spiritual struggle and your spiritual discipline. And he talks about the different types of people that actually happens to. So he said the results of sloth is basically this individual, like we said, it's cyclical. He convinces himself of two things. He says that character cannot be altered. Once a character is given, or once somebody has a certain character trait, this cannot be changed. The second is that human nature is immutable. Meaning that even the pathways to developing good character, these cannot be changed. Right? These are something that will always be the same. These things are unchanged.
This is where he's saying that, like,
These
unlike animals, humans can change. But
so he definitely gets to that, right? So we'll talk about why these arguments are wrong, right? Why these arguments are problematic? Because, like we said, who is the one who's saying this?
Myself.
the sloth.
Yeah, the sloth. Yeah, the one who refuses to
do
change.
that.
Yes.
No, yeah.
So, and like we said, their basic argument is the first. They say that khalq equals khuluq, right? The outward, just like the outward look and the outward appearance is unchanged, similarly, the inward appearance cannot change. And the second one is that it is impossible. It is impossible to suppress desires and anger. And they say that it's unachievable. Like, it can't be done. An individual cannot suppress their desires, and they cannot suppress their anger. Have we heard both of these arguments, or have we heard this before?
Yeah.
I can't change. This is how I am.
Yeah.
Right? This is something that we've heard, and not just that.
Is it true?
Huh?
Is it true?
You tell me. What do you think?
I don't know.
Even here, this idea of suppressing desires and anger, don't we hear it a lot?
Mm.
Who do we hear it from?
And lazy people.
Not from lazy people.
You.
No, we hear it a lot from the Sufi masters, right? They say, well, you have to remove your desires, and you have to remove, right? You have to remove your anger, right? We hear this a lot from them. What Ghazāli does is he actually puts this in perspective, and we'll talk about. He says both of these are wrong. Both of these are wrong. He says it is not equal, and that it's achievable. It's achievable, but not in the way that it's being presented.
Mm.
So the first, he says, there's a textual encouragement that we have a hadith, we have ayat, where the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he talks about individuals, he encourages us to actually change our character. Right? He says, al-ilm bil-ta'allum wal-hilm bil-tahallum. Right? He says that knowledge is seeking it, and seeking forbearance is the one who acts on it. The one who acts on it. Basically, if we want a character trait, what do? We had spoken about this previously.
do it, practice it.
We keep practicing it, right? We keep practicing it until it becomes something that is natural, until it becomes something that is part of our inner character. Practically, he says that people do change. He said there are examples of this. And he doesn't use the examples of people. He actually uses the examples of animals. So he uses the example of a falcon. He uses the example of a dog. And what is it? He uses the example of a horse. Why does he use those examples?
They can change.
He's like, if an animal, which is a being that is
Lowly.
lower than us, right? These animals are lower than us. If these can change, then why can we not change? And he also says that, so the second argument is suppressing angers and desires is unachievable. He says we need to understand the nature of man. This is the important thing. That if you understand the nature of man, you will understand that this is achievable and this is possible. He says that, number one, it's important to understand that are there elements of our character and nature that are unchangeable? Yes, absolutely, right? We as base people and base individuals, there are certain characteristics that we have that cannot be, like portions of them that cannot be changed. And he likens this to a seed. And he brings the difference between an apple seed and a date seed. Can a date seed ever become an apple tree? And can an apple tree ever become a date seed? Or a date tree? No, they can't. But does it mean either of these is bad? No, absolutely not. It just means that their potential is different. And he said that there are changeable aspects to it. That there are still, even within that unchangeable framework, there are definitely changeable aspects to that. So, and not just that, he says even the understanding is wrong. He said the idea isn't to suppress them. That's not the idea. The idea is to actually control them and channel them.
The direction.
And give them direction. So he says that accepting this change. Why is it that we as individuals are unable to accept this change? He said it depends on a number of things. There are a number of things that we have to keep in mind when we talk about changing this character. Number one, the temperament of the individual. Every person, like we said, is unique. Every person is different. And it's important to understand that temperament. And he talks about the different levels of temperament. Who is the one who is most likely to accept change, and who is the one that is least likely to accept change? So, and the second thing, he says there are two things. Number one, the temperament, and secondly, his mindset. Right? So we have a natural temperament in which we lead toward, and we also have a mindset on how we view certain deeds and how we view certain interactions. So within certain societies, certain families, certain cultures, stealing from other people within that family, within that circle is considered what? It could be considered good, right? That you were able to take advantage of them. It shows how intelligent you are. It shows how quick-witted you are. Certain circles are like that, unfortunately, right? Especially people who have been brought up in evil company, or people who have been raised in an oppressive society where all they learn is to shoot, all they learn is to kill, all they learn is to take advantage of others. And those things are considered praiseworthy because there are signs of strength. So he says that the effect of varying temperaments, how does this have an effect on the individual? He mentions that there are basically three things that have an effect, and those temperaments stem from these three things. And the longer that this part, or this section, or this characteristic is with that person, the more difficult it is to escape from that temperament. The first one he says is desire. He said a person is born with desire. Right? They are born with shahwa. Whether that desire be for food, whether it be for intimacy, whether it be for worldly things, right? The person is naturally born with this desire, this sense of desire. He said the second thing is anger. He said by the time a child reaches the age of 7, this is when anger starts making its appearance. So the most difficult one to get rid of so far is desire. Why? Because it's been with us the longest. The anger has come later. And then finally, he says discretion. He says, he said that this also has an effect on an individual's temperament, but it is the easiest to sway because it is the latest to actually appear in the fitrah, in the natural state of that individual. So the degrees of people, he mentions that there are 4. The first, the one who is on the natural disposition, the one who is on the fitrah. He says the second is the sinner who is aware, meaning that he's sinning but he feels guilty and he knows that this is a sin. He said the third is the one who he's not only does he sin, but he actually starts leaning toward and preferring those ugly traits. And he says lastly, the individual who's completely corrupted. He actually thinks those traits are praiseworthy, right? He thinks those evil traits are traits that an individual should seek after, and those things that they should be taught and they should be perpetuated. And he mentions that in general, that this person is considered ignorant. So ignorance isn't always bad. He said this person he's ignorant and he is misguided. This one, he is ignorant, misguided, and corrupt. And the last one, he says, not only is he ignorant, misguided, and corrupt, but he's also evil. And what's amazing is what he says about how do we deal with these people? What is the treatment for these people? For these 4 types of people, how do we treat them? Because we will fall into one of these categories, regardless, whoever we are. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us, especially from the last 2. I mean, but what is the treatment for the one who's ignorant?
Knowledge.
To teach him, right? To educate. Simple. Because what happens once he's educated? He'll act on it. No, he'll act on it. Simple. Like when the one who's ignorant and misguided. This is really interesting. I like this one. I mean, I liked all of them, but this one. What do you think? Because he needs a little bit more push, right? The education itself it might be enough, but it's usually not. So not only do we need to educate this person, what else do we need to do? Show. Ahsant. We have to give him good company. Like, what about this person? He prefers bad traits.
Change his environment.
So it's almost impossible.
I wasn't expecting that.
I wasn't either. I was like, Miskin, wow, this guy, like, really? You can't do anything for him? And lastly, he's these are Ghazāli's words. He's like, don't even bother. Like, don't even waste your time, on this guy. Yeah.
Run away.
No, this person, he might corrupt you.
So run away from him.
Allah musta'an. But I mean, saying that, who's Ghazāli talking to here? Who decides these levels? I do, right? As an individual. We can't go and say, this person is evil and corrupt, right? Why? Because all of a sudden we start categorizing. Well, we don't know where this person stands with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we have a general idea of where we stand. And if we have a general idea of where we stand, then these, even this one, is there salvation for him or no?
Yeah.
Yes, there is. There's salvation for everyone. There's no person that cannot be saved. Except for the one that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed a seal on his heart. Right? And those people, we don't know who they are. The only people who we know for sure have a seal on their hearts are the one that Allah and His Messenger told us about. Everyone else we have not. So, it doesn't mean that anybody can come back to the truth. Anybody can fix their character. Anybody can come to guidance. But, the deeper an individual is in this, the more difficult it becomes. But I think, in general, we can take this advice, regardless of whether we are here or here, correct? In making sure that we surround ourselves with good company, and making sure that we are continuously learning and striving. I'm sorry? Allah musta'an. May Allah guide me. So there are some misconceptions. So basically, there are those who believe. Oh man, I didn't make this an animation.
Oh yeah.
So basically, Ghazāli says that those who believe the goal is to actually remove anger, desire, and worldliness, he says that's ridiculous. He says this is absolutely ridiculous. There's no way you're going to remove the anger in your heart. There's no way you're going to remove the desire. There's no way you're going to remove the worldliness. It's not possible to remove, and because these are base characteristics, these are base traits that every single one of us has. And this idea to completely remove them, he himself is absolutely ridiculous. There's no way that this can happen. So he says that it's important to channel, right? We had talked about it before. That if you can't remove them, what do? You direct them. And you channel them, showing that you actually have control, right? We have control over all of these characteristics and how we channel them. So, for example, he said, if I didn't have a desire for food, what would happen? I would die, right? If I didn't have a desire for intimacy,
die out.
Right? Yeah, I think that's a better way. I thought this was a little clever, so I just. So the individual man would die, and over here, man as a species would die. All right. So these things, they have a function, and they're extremely important, especially if you channel them in the correct way. Even the Prophet ﷺ, when he spoke about intimacy, what did he say?
I love woman.
Well, I mean, he said that حُبِّبَ إِلَيْهِ مِن دُنْيَاكُمْ الطِّيبُ النِّسَاء, right? Like that, what is made beloved to me from your worldly things is, good fragrances and women. But what did he say specifically about intimacy? He said when a man is intimate with his wife, it is what? It is sadaqah. It is sadaqah. Why? Because he's channeling his desires in a good way, in a right way. So anger. If I didn't have anger over my property in life, I would have no desire to protect either of these. Again, it's important to understand that these things, they're very fundamental, they're very important parts of our character. We just have to understand how to channel them, we have to understand how to direct them, and use them for our benefit. And the nice example that Ghazāli has given in the past and mentioned before is how each of these, they are actually tools of the individual. How he uses those tools, they're either going to hurt him or they're going to benefit him. And if he understands how to control these, and he shows moderation in them, then they will actually be his pathway to Jannah. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enter us into it. Ameen. So what is the goal? What is the goal?
To channel them the right way.
Right? Balance and moderation. And that's what control means. And why is it balance and moderation? And I'll mention here. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَشِدَّ عَلَى الْكُفَّارِ وَرَحْمَةً بِهِمْ. That these individuals who follow Him are harsh. And harshness stems from what?
Anger.
From anger. Right? Even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us to be angry. Right? To be harsh toward them and compassionate toward each other. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالْكَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظَ, who restrain their anger. What does He not say?
Eliminate.
Who eliminate, who abolish it. Meaning that some anger is okay. And just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He talks about dhann, when He talks about suspicion, what does He say? He said ba'd. He says some suspicion is impermissible. Right? Some suspicion is a sin. Meaning that there are other types of suspicion that are completely fine. إن بعض الظن يعني المراد إن بعض الظن إيش مأجور مفهوم المخالفة. So when we hear the Sufi masters talking about this idea of eliminating anger and eliminating worldly desire, why do they say that? Why do they say that? And we will talk about it, because that's not what they mean, right? And it is and it isn't. And we have to definitely talk about what is it that they mean. Why is it that they mention this? Why do they talk about, with all of their students, they talk about all their murids, all the people who follow them, hey, no, you have to remove this love for the world, it needs to be removed. Any anger in your heart, you have to remove it. They keep talking about all those things. And the idea is, because we said the goal is what? The goal is balance and moderation, right? How does that play into balance and moderation? Because these are the two extremes. You guys like my little graphic there? So, like the difference between extravagance and avarice. What does avarice mean? Greed. Okay. Cowardice and recklessness. Yeah, I think we both understand that. Cupidity. Stupidity. What does cupidity mean? It's like an intense form of greed, right? It's an intense form of greed and indifference, right? So he's saying that there has to be a balance between these two. And why is it that they talk about it in this way? Why is it they talk about it in this way when Ghazāli is clearly mentioning balance and moderation? So he says that because our internal gauges are off, are completely off. So basically what they're calling for is a complete reset. They're calling for a complete reset. The reason they're calling for an abolishment is because they want you to push it all the way to the edge. Because my gauge only goes until here. But the real gauge needs to go up to here. This is what they're calling for. They're not calling for an abolishment because we already understand that asking to abolish these things is impossible. It's ridiculous. So when they're calling for an abolishment of it, they're saying push it all the way to the end. Push it all the way to the end so that you can reset your individual gauge. Because if I believe my gauge starts here, what happens? Huh?
I'll justify something.
I'll start justifying. I'm like, no, this is me yelling at this person is the justified amount according to my gauge. Me spending this much money or me wanting all these things is okay for me because this is according to my standard and my gauge. So we have to basically Ghazāli is saying go all the way to the extreme. Go all the way to the end, because when we do that, what happens? We learn to reset our gauges. And that way, when we reset our gauges, when we go back, we fall back where? Into the middle. And we become moderate. Versus If I believe my gauge is here, I'm still going to be leaning toward one side. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
You're calibrating this.
It's when you want.
Exactly.
It's when you want something. Say, but balance might give me $500, so I can give 500. I can give just 100. It's like exactly that's exactly what I want. You always ask more than you actually need because.
And who you ask more from? Who are we asking more from in these situations?
From our
From
nafs.
ourselves and from our nafs. And our nafs is very stingy. Our nafs is very stingy. So when we get a need, when we get that urge to give more. When we get that urge to be nice, take that extra step. Right? Do those things because these are ways again to recalibrate that gauge, to really bring us back to moderation. Because like we said, the goal is moderation. We have to be in the middle. If we're not in the middle, what are we? Extremists. And you know, subhanAllah, you know what's amazing about this? Being in the middle of something, why is it important to be in the middle? Because it's furthest from the extremes.
From both extremes.
From both extremes, right? This is the furthest place I can be from either extreme. Because if I go this way, what happens? I'm leaning toward one side. I'm going toward this extreme. And if I go this way, I'm leaning toward that extreme. Because we already know it's impossible to escape, yes? Like this scale, I can't escape the scale. So the best thing for me to do is to be as balanced and be as far apart from either extreme as possible. So this is the end of the chapter. This is the last thing that Imam Ghazāli talks about in terms of having balance, in terms of how to attain good character, in terms of the barriers and the obstacles that lead to good character. Inshallah, we'll open up the four questions. Wallahu a'lam, wa sallallahu ala khayri khalqin, nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi.
Just 2
Can
points.
we talk?
Yes, you can. Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
We miss you. We're jealous of these people over there.
May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replace me with someone better for you. I mean,
I'll replace you in Virginia so you come back to Jersey.
or I can convince all you guys to move here.
No, we know the housing prices there. We're not coming.
Fair enough.
I joined a little bit late, but I read one thing and I just don't want to be confused about it. Because the slide said the natural disposition is to be ignorant. Is that correct?
So no, he's saying that a person who is ignorant of all of these evil characteristics, he will be on the natural disposition. He'll be on the fifth one. Does that make more sense?
Okay.
Right. So if I'm ignorant of all of these evil characteristics, if I'm ignorant of how to lie to people, how to steal from people, how to take advantage of people, my natural disposition is going to lead me to. Are you with me? Or did we lose you?
Yeah. Okay. Alright. I see what you're saying. Okay. Alright. And the second thing was you're talking about being balanced and being in the middle, right?
Yeah.
But isn't being in the middle subjective? Isn't that different for each person?
And that's exactly what the goal is, right? I cannot judge that for you. And you can't judge that for me. All of us are going to have different scales.
So how do I know, like, what is my middle?
By taking it to the extreme. No, I'm being very honest. Taking it to the extreme, taking yourself further than you can realize. You know, basically, you're going to go take yourself to the limits because that will allow us to get back to our balance point. So why is it that you talk about, or you see a lot of the Sufi masters starving themselves? Why is it that you see a lot of them completely leaving off any type of lavish clothing? Why is it that you find many of them leaving off their worldly lives or leaving off intimacy for a long amount of time? Because they're basically trying to, even though some of these things in and of themselves are not prescribed, those individuals are acting on things that might be more problematic for them than they are for us. So when they take themselves to their limit, what happens to that gauge? Right, it comes back. It comes back to the middle, and at that point you can start acting. I mean, even from many of the companions, did all of them, not dress nicely, or did all of them dress like paupers? No, they didn't. Right? Did all of them pray all night? No, All of them didn't. Did all of them fast all the time? Did all of them read Quran all the time? No. They were all different because people, like you had mentioned, are individual. And each of us needs to determine what our personal challenge is, because the idea is to better our khuluq. And there are some characteristics that we will already be good at. Right? Some of us might naturally be generous, but some of us might not naturally be patient. Right? Some of us might not smile and interact with people. Right? Then we have to force ourselves into those situations where we do interact with them. Right? Because again, what is the idea? The idea is to reset that gauge to bring us back to moderation, which is why we push ourselves to our personal limits.
And it's okay if this moderation, this balance, or this middle line, if it's a moving target, as you progress personally, that's okay to have,
So we're constantly changing, right? As people, as humans, as sons, as fathers, as husbands, we're constantly changing. We're constantly changing, and because we're constantly changing, we constantly have to readjust our mark. We constantly have to readjust our gauges, because mujahada is it a one-time thing? That okay, now I'm generous and I'm done. Right? It's never going to end. It's never going to end. Can a person's personality be changed? I hope we answered your question, Yasmin.
Yes.
How are you gonna say yes, bro? It's not your question. No, but so the thing is, doing that constant readjustment, Akhi, this is what mujahadat al-nafs is, and the essence of all of this is what? Taqwa. Right? This is essentially what taqwa is bringing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala into all of our thoughts, bringing Him azza wa jal into every decision and everything that we do and everything that we make, because we constantly want to make sure that our scales are balanced. It's a constant struggle. It's not, it's like, okay, alhamdulillah, ana sabir alhan. Right? Or like, oh, alhamdulillah, I'm from the people who pray now. I mean, even Umar radiallahu anhu, after the Prophet ﷺ died, he went to Hudayfa, and what did he ask him? He said, am I from the munafiqeen? Even though the Prophet ﷺ gave him glad tidings of paradise. Why did he say that? Did he not believe the Prophet ﷺ?
His standards are so high that he constantly checked himself, constantly put himself account.
Which is fine. Holding yourself to account, I get all that. But the Prophet ﷺ told him that you're from the people of paradise. Why did he ask Hudayfa?
Did you want that to cripple him and change stuff? Something?
Maybe. Wallahu alam, I feel that he felt that applied only while the Prophet ﷺ was living.
But like in the Prophet is giving a bushra of
paradise. Yeah, no, he's saying that if as long as you're in front of me and you keep doing these actions, you're from the people of paradise.
Okay.
And then he took the in front of me part literally, or?
So that's why he asked, and he asked Hudayfa, "Am I from the munafiqeen?" He used to, and to the point where he used to go and follow Hudayfa and see which janazas Hudayfa prayed on or not.
So the question is, sometimes when I'm trying to change, especially when the New Year comes and stuff like that, I have a list of.
It's amazing how we only do it during the New Year.
SubhanAllah, huh?
Was it the Hijri or the Miladi?
The question is, so for me to acquire these good traits, is it recommended for me to have a mentor on the way who guides me through these, or I can just figure out my own way?
It's a good question. I don't know. I think I truly believe that when it comes to these character traits, the way of the Sadiq and the one who's trying to achieve them is going to be individual. I believe that some people do need a mentor, and I think some people can achieve it individually. In a lot of respects.
Or just don't even bother.
If you don't bother, then you're. Can we go back a few?
Number 4.
No, and all of those things are from the shaitan, right? They're just all distractions from the shaitan, saying that you can't change, like this is how you are, and all of those stem from arrogance. They all stem from arrogance.
Accept me for who I am.
Yeah, accept me for who I am.
Why don't you love me for who I am?
Yeah. No, and the thing is, like, even that question, I hate emotional blackmail, but it's like, the question is like, okay, what about if there are certain character flaws, I'm supposed to love those flaws? Or am I supposed to be your partner and helping you get better because I want you to help me get better? Right? Isn't that the purpose of marriage? That we are joining with a husband, we're joining with a wife, so that we both can draw near to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if that person isn't helping me do that, because even marriage and divorce, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revolve those two things around? He revolves them around taqwa. It's really amazing. That it's a constant theme that you find in many different situations and many different actions. But specifically marriage and specifically divorce, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He يربطها بالتقوى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ties both of these situations with taqwa. Because that's the goal. Why did the Prophet tell us to marry Dhat al-Din? Because she's supposed to be the one to help you get to paradise. She's not your guide, but she's there to help you because you want to help her.
So here we said that if somebody is a sinner and is misguided, so the ilaj is we educate them and then we give them good company.
Yes.
So.
And again, who is this talking about? This is not talking about the ilaj I'm trying to. Ma u'alij ghayri.
No, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm not treating another.
Yeah.
I'm treating myself.
Yeah.
And if I'm reading this book, I'm probably not too bad.
Yeah.
I should be, inshallah, I should be doing somewhat okay.
The book doesn't give you company.
I'm sorry?
The book doesn't give you company.
It's company with the dead, man. The best company you can have.
Haqiqatan,
Yeah.
what is a good company? Because everyone it's a confusion actually. Even today, actually, somebody asked me.
Yeah.
Is somebody who's interested in Islam.
Yeah.
It's like every group claims something.
Yes.
Okay, I'm on the thing. I'm on this. I'm on this. I'm this. I'm this.
Yeah.
So, what is the mizan of me to differentiate? Okay, Sheikh Farhan is on good company, but I am not.
Okay, so for me as an individual, the mi'yar or the measuring stick I like to use as a person is when I listen to other people speak, is this person dividing people or is he bringing them together?
Okay.
Right? Because the one who's bringing people together has the manhaj nabawi. This is how the Prophet ﷺ worked. And this is why people were attracted to him. This is why people went to him. Do you really think that لو كنت فظا غليظ القلب لعنت? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about the Prophet ﷺ, had he been hard-hearted and stiff, he's like, the people would turn away from him. So the one who's turning other people away from each other, well, that's a clear sign for me. For me personally, it's a very clear sign that this person is not. هذا ليس منهج النبوة.
Can I be a devil's advocate for
Yeah,
that?
absolutely.
But what if I know that Uthman is a fitna in the community? I should warn him against so that he doesn't corrupt these people. So should I speak about him?
Jay, that's a very good point. So is it better to speak about an individual who could die or speak about the ideas that are problematic?
Nice.
Right? Because the individual is going to die. Even in Islam, if you look at the scholars on how they deal with the rawat and how they deal with the mukhalif, and sometimes it could be the same muhaddith, right? Like Imam al-Dhahabi is a great example of this. When he deals with the rawi, when he deals with the narrator, you'll find that there's a lot of harsh speech concerning, and even that is concerning his narration. Why? Because it's a preservation of the religion. But when it's talking about a scholar or an individual, how he deals with him in a very soft way. It's very different. Like, and why is that? Because regardless of how harmful we might see this person or individual, right? He has the right to Islam. Even people who we view as terrorists, right? Like, we can warn against them, we can warn against their actions, we can warn against their belief system. But at the end of the day, can I start making fun of him as a person, as an individual?
No.
Look at this terrorist, look how long his nose is, or you know what I mean? Look how fat he is. And why? Because mazal haqq al-Islam. Like, he still has the right of the Muslim. And even me speaking like that, what does that show about my character?
The character is
right. It's flawed.
Yeah.
Because I'm doing ghibah of this person. You know what I mean? I'm not. Who am I protecting with that? And not on top of all this warning, this idea of fitna, yahi. How arrogant am I to think I encompass all the religion? And that I can go around and I can now warn against all of these different people. like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he made me the custodian of the deen.
Wow.
Like I came to protect Allah's religion. Allah will protect His own religion, habibi. You think Islam survived this long because of me?
Not sure.
If it was up to us as individuals, man, Islam wouldn't last 5 minutes.
That's true.
It's because of Allah's promise that it's going to continue ila qiyam as-sa'a, that it's been preserved. It's not because of us individuals. The only role we play is the one we choose to contribute. Right? If I'm contributing to the deen, this is not even in Allah's benefit. This is in my personal benefit.
Yeah.
And like just that viewpoint, like I'm here to protect the deen. Like, you know, who are you to protect Allah's religion? Allah is going to protect His religion. And not just that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's given us tools to help differentiate. What are those tools? He's given us the Quran. He's given us the Quran. He's given us the Sunnah. And He's given us
The intellect.
our intellect. And on top of our intellect, He's also given us a moral compass in our hearts. Right? That which will... The only problem that we have is we have a problem being honest with our own hearts. Many times. We'll see something going on, but because it's part of my circle, or it's because it's part of my group,
Yeah.
I'm not going to say anything. Or because something is part of the culture, something's part of the status quo, I'm not going to say anything. Even though my heart is telling me this is wrong. And we don't realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ya ikhwan, what if we stand in front of Allah and Allah said that, and your Prophet told you, ma haka fi sadr, that which gnaws at your heart and you did not act on it. Your heart was telling you. It was being, you know, were you being honest with yourself? Were you remembering me when your heart was gnawing at you and telling you that what you were doing was wrong? And you know, we had mentioned this before. The only thing that we can protect as individuals is what?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, not our own self, but what else? Can we protect the deen? What can we protect?
My people of course.
Right, we protect ourselves, we protect our families, but the only other thing that we can actually protect is ignorance.
You can protect
Yeah.
your own deen.
You can protect your own deen. How? By using all these tools. But I can protect ignorance also. How? By placing a veil over my eyes. Because I'm part of this group, khalas, I'm in. I don't need to listen to what anybody else has to say. Ya ikhwan, al-haqq thaqeel. The truth is heavy. And is it really a deen? Is it really a belief if somebody brings a doubt or somebody brings a shubha and I'm not able to answer it? Or Islam isn't able to answer it? So, like, you know what I mean? Like, there are certain things I can answer and certain things I can't. I just don't have the ability to answer everything. But does Islam have the answer to everything?
Yeah.
Yes, of course it does. And if Islam has the answer to everything, why does it matter what shubha goes or what doubt enters? Islam will always push back. And why will Islam push back? Because it's the correct deen. It's the correct religion. And when you're on the correct religion, you know that this religion can stand up to anything that comes up. With who? By itself. Doesn't need me. So this idea of like, oh, I'm here to protect this, okay? It's ayn al-kibr. This is like ras al-kibr. It's like, this is like the pinnacle of arrogance. That I as an individual am a custodian of Allah's religion. There's only one gateway, and that is our beloved Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
So, one question that ties to that, right? A lot of time, we actually get misguided from the guidance of education that we just got.
Like, so basically everything that you learn, it gets undermined? Is that what I'm understanding? Or what?
No, like, I go to the wrong individual.
Okay.
I go to Uthman.
Yes.
And he teaches me something
Okay.
which is contrary to the Kitab and the Sunnah. So now you see he corrupted my own fitrah.
Okay, but the thing is that why were you listening to him?
Because I was ignorant.
Okay, but that's fine.
Yeah.
Ignorance. So what do I do in that case? Let's say somebody gives me wrong information. What is my goal? What is my role as an individual, as a Muslim?
To go research.
I just go. I cope. My whole life is mujahada. My whole life is searching, researching. And just because I believe something, does it mean that can't be changed like 2, 3, 5, 10 years down the line?
Yeah,
It's so easy. One of the oldest Sahaba, Ibn Abi Quhafa, individual goes through like 80 years of his life not believing in Allah, not believing in His Messenger, worshipping idols, and he accepts his Islam. that if a person can make that huge a change, you're telling me we can't make small adjustments along the way? And how many of us, from the time we first started learning about religion up until this point, like there's something new that just completely changes our paradigms. It's very natural. There's nothing wrong with that. But does it shake your faith or does it make it stronger?
Stronger.
Right, it makes it stronger. Because you're like, wow, this, actually, if I look at it like this, well, yeah, that makes so much more sense, and it brings that much more happiness to our hearts. And what, what that happiness is? That's yaqeen. And yaqeen is the essence of Iman. Any other questions? We're good.
Controversial questions.
Controversial? Always. with me, right?
So, I don't think I caught the last week when you talking when you got the original question, but you mentioned a lot of things about hijab earlier today. So from what I understood, you're saying that in society, in old Meccan society, hijab was not required because unless you're a Muslim and you were free. So obviously in society there was women without hijab.
Yep.
Similar to how society is today.
Yep.
And that's okay.
It's completely fine.
And there's no punishment for not wearing hijab.
Yep.
So
There's no legal punishment.
no legal punishment. Why do we hear differently everywhere else?
People like pushing particular narratives for their own interests. Because they were taught a certain way. They're happy with the status quo. They're happy with not challenging certain things. And this is what they push for and this is what they teach. Because, I mean, it even goes against the whole concept of what the Basal. Why do I need to lower my gaze if there's nothing to look at? Right? Like, if everybody's commanded to cover from head to toe, why am I lowering my gaze? What am I looking at? In Ghadab, subhanAllah, it's we just, I think because we've as a recently developing nation state type culture, we've just grown up with this authoritarian idea of Islam. When we really need to understand, it's not a top down religion, right? It's a bottom up. And what does that mean? That I as an individual have to make my own decisions, and I'm responsible for them. Meaning, right now, is there anybody who knocks on our door and be like, "Hey, zakat's due"? Who pays zakat? I do, and I decide when my fiscal year starts. I decide, even if I pay too much or I pay too little. Is there anyone who be like, "Oh, you pay too little"? There's no one. Is there anybody who comes and knocks on our door? Ya akhi, come on, it's been 40 years, you haven't made hajj yet. Even salah. Does anybody go around knocking on the door saying, "Hey, it's time to pray, you need to go pray"? It's a very individual religion. There's individual accountability. There's not government accountability for these things. And this is a misconception I believe we have, is because we come from authoritarian societies.
So do you I have all daughters.
Yeah.
So like, how do you communicate that the right way to like this next generation of women that have to make that decision so they can make it in a balanced way?
Sure. So I mean, there are steps in developing a relationship with our children. The first step is to get them to love us, right? And a lot of times I feel that step is the one that's overlooked. If we teach our children to love, it's very easy for them to learn how to love Allah as a messenger. But if we never teach them to love, how are they going to know how to? Right? I think that is the most crucial step, is developing that relationship and making sure that our children love us. And that doesn't mean spoiling them. Spoiling is not loving your children. Spoiling is a dismissive tool that parents use in order to get children off their back. It's actually when we create boundaries for them that they feel that they have attention and they feel that they're loved. Those boundaries, how are they dealt with? It's going to vary from family to family. It's going to vary from person to person. And I know a lot of people don't like hearing this. It's going to vary from child to child. Some children have different temperaments, and they have to be dealt with differently. It can't be a universal, okay, this worked for my eldest, so I'm going to apply it to all of them. No, it's not going to work. Every child needs to be dealt with as an individual. So understanding that relationship, teaching them to love, and so that they learn how to love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a messenger, and then teaching them the different obligations. Right, and I think when we implement those obligations is important. I feel that in a lot of families, what happens is the hijab is something that's not implemented until she has her first cycle. Right. By that time, she hasn't even gotten used to it. She's developed no attraction to it. Even if she sees her mom wearing it, she's never worn it herself. So I think from the time that they're commanded to start praying, which is 7, that's a good time to start introducing it, at least for the prayers. Right, so that now they're starting to develop a habit of wearing this hijab. one of the conversations I had with my daughter is like she's still young, so she would take it off in the car, but she's starting to get to that age, where she has to wear it all the time. And she's like, well, I'll take it off. I was like, no one can see. That was her response. I said, okay. Is there a chance somebody can see? She was like, yeah. I was like, is there a good chance? She was like, yeah. I said, okay. I said, that's why you don't wear it. I said, in the house, can anybody see? She was like, no. I said, okay. I said, it's not because of your perception, right? It's about understanding the overall perception. And again, it's instilling that, encouraging them, telling our daughters they look beautiful when they wear the hijab. Those for, I don't mean to summarize relationships with our children, but telling our boys we're proud of them and telling our girls they're beautiful is a great way to build their confidence. And that's really lacking in, I can't say all communities, but I know our community, at least, it's a huge problem. Like, we do not tell our sons that we're proud of them, and then we wonder why they start straying. It's because they have no confidence. I'm not saying that I'm doing it well in any way, shape, or form, but yeah.
Do you feel like your daughter will be able to make that decision on her own, and if she chooses not to do it, at that point, you did everything you were supposed to do, so it's not on you.
So the thing is, once our children are adults, they're adults. Right? That's it. They're mukallaf. They are responsible for their actions. I can guide them. I can, I can put some pressure because I'm still paying for them, right? So as long as that financial relationship is there, where I am taking care of them, I can still exert control over them.
Sure.
Obviously, as they get older, that effect, it lessens. So it's just important to keep those things in mind. If I don't teach them to do any of these things, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might hold me accountable for my tarbiyah, for my upbringing, but He can't hold me accountable for her independent choice.
Interesting. Unfortunate fun fact I wanted to just share about the hijab in Tajikistan is that it's a secular state, it's a Muslim majority, but secular state, and hijab is cultural first, and secondly, there are many cases when prostitutes
Will take advantage.
and they do wear a hijab.
Yeah.
I'm not criticizing them. I understand they do it out of fear because it's a culture oppressive, and they will be just beaten up and stormed. I understand, but I don't know what else to say. Meaning, I don't have daughters, I cannot share anything, but I have female relatives, close relatives, and I understand it's a big struggle, it's not easy, and I always make focus on the pillars.
Yeah.
First of all, think of the pillars. Hijab, it is obligatory, is it wajib? Yes, it is. However, I'm not sure, but the ruling on hijab was in Medina, the 5th year of the hijab, or 6th, 7th? Okay, so it wasn't the first 13 years.
Basically, the first decade and a half of Islam, there was no hijab.
Yeah, meaning it is obligatory, but it's not like a pillar. It's not like
it's not a pillar.
It's not. Yeah. So first of all, Salah, Zakat, Siyam, Hajj. Think of those. I always think of that. And I said, I understand, and I always say to them, look, it is obligatory, yes, but do it as soon as you can. I understand you are not.
They're awliyat, right? So they're priorities.
Yeah.
What are the priorities? Priority of 5 pillars of Islam, 6 pillars of Imam. I'm not saying everything else is up for discussion, but what I am saying is that everything else, is there room for discussion? Yes. Right? Is there room for discussion? Absolutely. But this is where we draw the line. And like the 7, 8, the major sins, like drinking alcohol, eating pork, lying, stealing, zina, etc. Like, focus on those things. And like I said, developing that relationship needs, unfortunately, there's no prescription that I can give. I myself was going through the process, so I can definitely feel, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy on all parents and all daughters.
You said the hijab was introduced a decade and a half later?
Yeah.
After,
it was obligated. Yeah.
How was it?
It was a verse. The verse came down in Surah Al-Baqarah.
Okay.
Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He obligates the believing women to wear their khimar.
Is there any reason that it took that long for that to happen?
Yes, because Islam is an internal religion, right? So it's important to build up the taqwa of the people and to build up their belief, And after that, when you tell them to stop drinking, when you tell them to wear hijab, it becomes easy, right? You're like, okay, well, I have so much conviction in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I have so much conviction in this religion and its truth that anything it tells me to do, I'm going to do it.
Even Aisha, she said about alcohol, commented, if the ruling, if prohibition on alcohol were revealed early, nobody would
accept it as not. Because it was a societal ill, right? They were just so tied to it.
Step by step, like by evolution, not by revolution. Imposing.
Islam is not it's not a dictatorial religion at all. It's a very much impersonal. I was actually having a conversation with a priest and a rabbi, and they were talking about the tithe. And they were like, wait, they're like, so everybody just gives their own tithe? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, who do they give to? I was like, whatever they want.
Give what, excuse me?
The tithe, there's a cap.
Oh, okay.
So there's a poor, it's just a poor tithe is something that's common between all religions, but we call it zakat. So they're like, man, people have to like submit their like W-2s and stuff to us. It's like, and it has to go to the church that they're a part of. Or the synagogue that they're a part of. You cannot be a member of that particular one unless you pay the tithe.
They give W-2s?
There are some.
I mean, some are more extreme than others, but I don't think it's everyone. But some of them, yes.
There are some sects that do that too.
Yeah.
Islam.
Oh yeah, I mean you'll find in some of the Shia that there's hummus. They'll take that. But again, they're more fringe elements than they are the mainstream. Any other questions? جزاكم الله خير. سبحان الله وبحمده.
جزاك الله خير.